Alright, so now we're trying to move the paddle around the screen, and the way that we did it before is we just blitted the paddle at this location, so there was no movement going on. But now that we want movement going on, what we added was this bit of code to our if-else statement that's inside of our for loop. And so if you recall earlier, I mentioned that pygame.event.get gets all of the keystrokes that have happened in this iteration of the while loop, which runs once every 60 seconds. So let's assume the W key is pressed because the player 1 wants to move up, and the up key is pressed because the player 2 wants to also move up. So we have this function here returns back two elements on the array. It returns the W key and it also returns the up arrow key. But first, event is equal to the W key because that was, let's say that was pressed for, that's the first thing on the in the array, and then the second thing on the array is the up arrow key. So the first iteration of the for loop, this event variable is going to be equal to the W key. The second iteration is going to be equal to the up arrow key. So what's going to happen is it's going to come in here and it's going to say, is the quit, is that event type equal to quit? No, it's not the red button, so we can skip that. And then it comes in here and says, okay, was it a down, a key down type of event? Yes, it was a key down type of event because I'm holding down the W key. So it comes in here and it's going to check, is the key event, is the key the up arrow key? And if it is, then I'll adjust my move up and move down variables. And these two variables are going to be Boolean variables. And the way that it's going to work is if move up is equal to true, the paddle's going to move up. If move down is equal to true, the paddle is going to be moving downward. So if the up arrow key is being pressed, if that's the case, then we're going to set move up equal to true and move down equal to false. And then if we have a key down event, up arrow key is pressed. If we have a key down, oh, I'm sorry. So this now checks if the down arrow key is being pressed. And if it is being pressed, that means the player wants to move down. So we want to switch the move up variable to false and the move down variable to true. Okay? So that's that. And then after it checks that, it's going to check if the key was released, right? So this basically means was the key released after being pressed down. Then this would be true. And if it is true and the up arrow key was released, then we're going to change move up to be false, stopping its upward movement and stopping its downward movement, because move down is going to be equal to false also. So the paddle is now just going to sit there. It's not going to move up or going to move down, because move up is false and move down is equal to false. And if the down arrow key was just released, then move down is going to be set from true to false, which makes move up false and true false. I'm sorry, move up false and move down false. So again, the paddle is just going to sit there. And then it comes back into the for loop, and now this time the event is equal to the W key. Let's say the first time it was equal to the up arrow key, and it did all that. Then the second time it's going to come in, event's going to be equal to W key, and we need to check for that. All right. So how do we check for that? Well, right here inside this if statement, we're going to add another branch, right? So if event.key is equal to pygame dot k underscore w is the key. So if the W key is pressed, then what do you want to do? Well, we want to change our move up and move down variables. But again, this is now for our first paddle, not for our second paddle. Let's assume that these variables here are for our second paddle. So now, in order to do this, we need to have a separate move up to, a move down to, okay? And we need to adjust them accordingly. Same thing down here. We need to add another branch. I guess that begs the question: where do we make these move up and move down variables? Well, a good place would be right here, right? Right, since they're associated with this paddle, we can put them right here, right next to that paddle. And you're going to make move up, set it equal to false, and move down and set it equal to false. Why? Because when you first start the game, what do you want the paddle to do? You want the paddle to just sit there and not move at all. So we're going to set them both to false. If you had move up equal to true, then the paddle would start moving upward right when you start the game. Okay, so we set them both equal to false. Now, what we also added after we finished the for loop, so the for loop is just so that we can adjust the move up and move down variables. Now, after we finish the for loop, then we get into this little piece of the algorithm, this if statement. And this if statement, it says, okay, well, if one of these move up and move down variables is equal to true, then I'm going to come in here and do this, right? So I'm going to check, is the move up variable equal to true? Okay, it is. So then I'm going to take my y variable, and I'm going to decrement him by speed. So speed is a variable that you need to make, right? So I guess a good place to make it is right here. It's going to be a global variable. I don't know. It could be local. It could be global. However you want to, whatever makes sense to you. I set it equal to 10, and 10 equals 10 pixels, right? So if the move up variable is true, then we're going to take this y variable and we're going to decrement him by 10. So what does that mean? That means that when we go to blit the paddle, we're not going to use this middle of the screen anymore. We're going to use the y variable. So when we make our y variable, we want to set him equal to this value here, which is going to set him equal to the center of the screen, right? So, right. So then when we start out, the paddle is going to be blitted to the center of the screen. And then when it comes back into the while loop, it's going to check if any keys were pressed, and if they are, then it's going to set move up or move down equal to true. Then it's going to fall into this if statement here, and if move up is true, it's going to come into this branch, and it's going to decrement the y position by 10, which will move the paddle in an upward direction. Then we come down to the blit. The blit is going to blit this surface to this y position that's been adjusted upward, right, a little bit farther up on the screen, and then we're going to flip the projector on and turn it back off. And then it's going to come back into the while loop. Let's assume the guy is still pressing the up arrow key. That means move up is true. So if move up is true, we're going to decrement the y position by another 10. And that's going to blit the paddle to 10 pixels higher up on the screen. Because remember, the top left corner of the screen is 0. 0, right? So 0 on the x-axis, 0 on the y-axis. As you move downward, the y increases. As you move to the right, the x increases. So as we are decrementing by speed, we are moving the position of the paddle in an upward direction. And if we are incrementing by speed, we're moving the paddle's y position by 10, which is moving in a downward direction, right? So then here with the x position, well, we could just the paddle doesn't move on the x-axis, so we could just set this to whatever we want, right? But ideally, he should be on the right side of the screen. So I'll go ahead and run this now, and I'm gonna press the up arrow. You can see he moves up, right? And I move down, and he moves down. Now we have this issue of the trailing sprites, which we'll talk about in the next video.